Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 184th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic is the question, is white oppression real? In the last few years, there's been a drastic increase in racial unrest in the United States. This has been accompanied by increased accusations of white oppression of Blacks. Is there an increase in oppression, or is it merely opportunistic hyperbole? Today's panel begins with Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Joe Gaines, former member of the faculty of the University of Akron and Wadsworth High School. Patty, point blank, after all the efforts on the part of government, business, public education, and universities, and multiple organizations to level the racial playing field, are we still stuck in the days of Jim Crow and segregation?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that we're stuck in the days of Jim Crow and of former segregation. Obviously, things have improved over the years for a great many reasons. Of course, I have to say that, I'm not a person of color, so that I would not have felt or seen those types of aggression or types of segregation. It wouldn't have affected me. So it's a little hard to judge. I can only go by what I see. I think what's happened in the last few years is that people are becoming more vocal about the situation. Those that have felt segregation and felt intimidated are more likely to say something about it. And on the other side, those that want to or feel that people of color should be intimidated, should be harassed, should be prevented from doing certain things, are becoming more vocal as well. I think we saw this, unfortunately, when the Voting Rights Acts and some of the conditions of that were removed about 2 years ago, with the statement by the Supreme Court that there is no discrimination left and there is no need for that. And as soon as that was done, and I mean literally within a couple of days, many states rushed to enact various voting laws which could be determined or deemed to be discriminatory against Blacks. I think as some examples, we can see that discrimination still exists and that there still is oppression. Just saw a blurb a couple of days ago where it was a baseball game between the Colorado Rockies and the Miami Marlins. And it was held in Colorado, and a member of the of the Marlins, was a person of color, was shouted out by fans in the stadium, very discriminatory, very nasty epithets at him, done, right there in public where everybody can hear. Now, does this go back to the days of, when Jackie Robinson was first appearing on the field, where he was attacked unmercifully by the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates, or when he was spiked by runners on first base intentionally because he was Black? No, it hasn't gotten to that point, but it does seem to be more vocal and more out front that this type of thing still exists. I watched a couple of weeks ago the hearings on the January 6th riots and invasion of the Capitol, and watched as one of the officers, and I believe he was a member of the Capitol Police, who was the person of color, and he went through all of the epithets that were shouted at him by supposedly freedom-loving, America-loving people that were meant to insult him, to attack him, and they used race as the motive. So to say that oppression doesn't exist anymore, I think is wrong. Perhaps we've gotten to the point where, yes, it's gotten better, but I think that there are those that feel that it has slowed down to a point where we need to be making greater moves and greater strides to prevent racism. There is an uptick in extremist groups that, whether it be the Proud Boys or whether it be the KKK, groups of this type that want to place race as a big issue, they are becoming more vocal. They are gathering more members. And so that this would look as though racism is still a problem. Again, it's not the same as 1865, but to say that it's all okay and everything's fine, I think is a stretch.
Okay, let me have a question for you before we move on. In your mind, is there a difference between a racial insult and oppression?
No, not really, because if you are using certain words which are inflammatory in nature, their intent is to oppress that person, to demean them. There's no difference. That's why they're being used. No, they're not swinging a club, but it is obvious then the feelings of that person hurling that epithet. And that's not going to be the type of person that's going to not discriminate against you in other settings.
Okay, well, you just defined oppression, which is something I wanted to discuss on this program.
Oh.
Bryan, what are your thoughts? Are you in total agreement with Patty again?
Well, I will add that Black Lives Matter and Black Bloc that go along with it are extremist groups. I view them as very extreme in their views. I view them when they go out and they burn down Black businesses in Chicago. I saw the video of the chief of police, the retired chief that was shot. I view that as oppression. I see videos of Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people, being run down and beat in the streets of New York City. I view that as oppression. Asian people are being beat, and there's nary a word on social media. It seems to me that oppression can run both ways. I'm against all oppression, whatever color you are or whatever race you are, I'm against that. No one deserves to be singled out for their beliefs, their race, their religion, where they live, what color of their skin are. I'm against that whole thing, but we cannot just sort of pigeonhole this with just Black people being oppressed, when in some of these instances, it's the Black people doing the oppression, and they seem to get a free pass on this.
No, I have to interrupt, Brian. I'm not trying to
Patty, I did not interrupt you, so let me just finish here.
Okay, sorry.
When Black people are being beat, when Black people are beating older Hasidic Jew women in the streets of New York City, and there's plenty of video of it, nobody says anything about that oppression. So I think oppression can cut both ways here. And I think we need to realize, another little side note, that baseball game that Patty is referring to was the All-Star game, which was pulled out of Atlanta, a majority Black community, probably $500 million worth of revenue to Black businesses in Atlanta because of some drummed up voting law that Atlanta, because of IDs. I find it really suspect that we can't expect people to get an ID of some sort. I've worked the polls, Patty's worked the polls. I would think that there probably won't ever be an all-star game played in Ohio because of our oppressive voting rules that Atlanta and Georgia put in place that are very similar to ours. So I'm really kind of wondering, when we throw around words like oppression, where do we really draw the line for it? And it sort of gets my dander up when we excuse other sorts of oppression, and we don't go after it because of the person's color. So that's where I'm really coming down on this. I really think that we have come a long way. I'm not a person of color. I don't know if I've ever experienced oppression with the latest definition. Definitions of words change. You know, someone called me a bigot on Facebook the other day because I posted a meme of a metal sliding board, and the meme basically said we were tougher than the current generation. Now, I don't view myself as a bigot. I thought it was a funny meme, but we're throwing around words like oppression and racism and bigotry and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if people really understand the weight of those words that we use. Does oppression exist in our society? Yes, it does. Is it as widespread as maybe back several hundred years? No, I don't believe so. I think we are really trying as a society to root out oppression wherever it is. And I don't believe it's just extreme rightist groups. I think there are extreme groups on both sides that are using this as a sort of a crudgeon to beat everybody over the head with. So I denounce all sorts of oppression, all people of color, no matter what race, religion you are, you know, it's got to stop. So that's where I come down on it. I don't believe it's just a Black issue. It's an issue that this society has been dealing with for some time, and it cuts both ways. When it comes to religion and race, we cannot excuse the things that we've seen. And it's not just one of those, oh, that doesn't happen that often. It's happening a lot in these communities. So that's where I feel about oppression. I don't think we need to, I think we need to really continue doing what we're doing. I think we're doing a better job in the past, but I don't view most people as being racist. I don't view most people as being bigotry. I don't believe my whiteness makes me an oppressor.
Ron, what do you think?
Bryan, good points for a change. I'm surprised.
Oh,
No, not really. Yeah, I
follow Ron on Facebook. He's got a lot of great recipes.
following along with this, John, my initial reservations about the topic were thinking that we probably needed a few folks of color on here to give us a straight perspective. But that doesn't mean I don't think we should discuss it, and I do think we should discuss it. Do we have oppressive systems? Well, they tell me that we have systemic racism. No, we don't really have Jim Crow laws as such, although some of the voter regulations that are being put in seem to be targeted on Black communities and communities of color, from anything you can read. Since moving back to Ohio about 20 years ago, I haven't really met that many folks of color. When I lived in Connecticut in the 70s and 80s, I did have many associations. Most of these people tended to be middle class, people at work, people in my church, people in the singing groups I was on, and people on the two boards of directors that I served on. At least one of these folks was an older gentleman who had been a jazz musician in the 40s, and he had lots of stories about Jim Crow laws at the time. And those don't, by and large, exist now. A person can go to any motel they want to and that sort of thing. So is it white supremacy that's going on? Am I a white supremacist? I don't know. I'm in the middle of it. I can't tell. I'm a middle-class white guy. I'm sure that I grew up with privileges that poor people of color do not have. Is it true that there are oppressive systems going on? Well, I agree with Bryan. There undoubtedly are. I have an Asian friend, Asian American friend, who tells me of in his growing up years about how he had some problems in a small town. His father, who was Korean, had some problems in that small town, but by and large, they got along. So thinking about all the other systems that go on, I disagree with Bryan a little bit about Black Lives Matter. It doesn't really matter to me that people may be exploiting this. I find it analogous to organizations going back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, like the Black Power movement and Nation of Islam and that sort of thing, and the Black Panthers, that it comes about, I think, because it makes us uncomfortable to think about it. It makes us uncomfortable to experience it, what is going on in the world. But it's the idea of it, the basic behind of it is we need the attention. We need you to hear us. We need to talk about this. If it makes you uncomfortable, that's on you. Why are you uncomfortable? I think it's been a healthy stimulus to have this going on. Yeah, there's obviously some things going on with it that are not savory, that have been perhaps not even legal, but I think it's by and large a good thing. And so is there oppression? Yes, there is. Are we part of it? I don't know. It's hard to tell because we're inside it. It's just the white system of white people. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that.
Okay, Joe, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wish we had somebody that was African-American on our panel.
Why, Joe?
Want to give us their view.
We know their view.
No, we don't. We really don't. We know what we want their view to be or what we think the view is, but do we really know what their view is?
Have you ever watched a video of a riot?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we're talking about individuals.
Yeah, read the signs that individuals. Well, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but we are individuals. I mean, as a white person, I'm sitting here thinking, well, everything's fine. Well, it's not.
Well, Joe, excuse me. You know, I thought about this when Ron brought it up, that we as a bunch of middle-class white people don't have a right to discuss this issue.
No.
But we're the accused. We have every right in the world to discuss how we're being accused of being racist. We all are.
I understand that, but I also understand if that's true, which I think it is, then blacks have the right to do what they're doing in the protesting and so on, and the Black Lives Matter and so whatever. I'm not against any of that, but oppression has been with us for a long time, racial oppression, and we can't seem to get rid of it.
Or at least the accusation of it.
What do you mean?
We can't get rid of the accusations. The oppression, well, I've got questions about it, but go ahead.
Well, that's why I would agree with Joe that we need someone who is possibly experiencing this to come and tell us about it.
That's exactly what I mean. Yes. Oh. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I don't experience it. I experience the white part of it, not the African-American part.
Yeah.
There's another thing right there. I don't know what to say. Do I call them black? Do I say African-American? You know, what do I say? That's not oppression, but it does put me in a situation where I have to be careful because I don't insult anybody. That's the last thing I want to do. I don't know. It's changed a lot for the better in many cases, but it hasn't changed completely in the sense that we still have people who are being mistreated, spoken against, and not having a voice. They don't have a voice, and they need that voice.
I had an experience earlier in the week that I wanted to share with you. I was watching a video of Thomas Sowell being interviewed. In that interview, he discussed the thousands and thousands of Black Europeans whose fathers were World War II GIs, and that they grew up in Europe without having the history of the Black oppression in the United States. They, interestingly enough, their test scores on intelligence are equal to the whites in Europe, where the blacks in the United States are considerably lower than their white counterparts. And I started thinking about how the Black experience has created a culture that is not as appreciative of education, of being law-abiding, family forming, and all of that. There is a Black culture in the United States that does not exist with the Blacks in Europe. That Black culture, I would have to say the beginning was 1619, when the first Black set foot in the United States as a slave. Or was not the United States in 1619. That the Black culture that I think is the focal point of a lot of poor decisions on the part of Blacks, the lack of ambition to succeed, is a real, it's a function of the way they were treated from the time they set foot on this continent. And it didn't go through a significant change until 1964. In many ways, when I read about the Jim Crow era and the kind of impact that it has had on Blacks, that was all on us. That was all on the whites. We created the Jim Crow era. We created the slavery. We, in essence, created the Black culture that I think has been responsible for so much bad decision-making on the part of Blacks. The European Blacks don't have that culture. They don't have the poor performance in education and wealth creation.
John, are we generalizing a little bit?
Generalizing?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking about Blacks and whites.
You know, if
John,
you
I
want to
think
read
that's
a
quite
good book,
profound, really.
if you want to read a good book by Thomas Sowell, it's called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And he goes in and does a deep dive on everything we're talking about today. Now, there are certain parts of the Black community that don't want to listen to a Thomas Sowell because they consider him an Uncle Tom, you know.
Yeah.
He's sort of the plantation, he's the house butler, so to speak. But there's other very, you know, very good strident voices in the Black community that talk about some of the real issues that the Black community is facing. Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell, you know. So, you know, all you have to do is listen to some of them and read what they have to say and, you know, draw your own conclusions from it. So
I have an anecdote I'd like to tell you a little bit about that I read not too long ago, a couple of weeks back, that really speaks to this. This is a woman who has 4 children, she's white, all 4 children are by white fathers, but 2 of them are Black that she adopted. And she says there was no problem when they were cute little boys and cute little toddlers growing up. But as they grew into adulthood and into their teen years, she began to notice significant changes in the way people viewed her Black sons and the way they viewed her white sons. And one example she gave, and I won't go into it much, but for example, if they went to a department store, the Black boys got followed around by clerks,
Right.
being carefully observed so that they wouldn't steal anything. The white boys, no, never. So that's a kind of in a microcosm, something of what we're talking about here. A difference in attitude, a difference in racial viewing of the races that exists in our country, and as John, as you say, has existed probably since 1619. Again, because of the whole cultural differences that are going on here. It exists, and it's hard to fight it, I guess.
Good point, Ron.
You know,
I'm
John,
wondering, yeah, go ahead.
you mentioned education in the system. I think we have to look at the quality of education that's been provided to people of color as opposed to whites. If you look at the quality of the teachers actually that are placed in certain schools that have a high percentage of students of color, makes a big difference. If you look at the home situation, when you talk about the home, but you also have to look at where these people are living. And are these people living in the nice 4-bedroom ranch in the suburb of a community, or are they living in the inner city in a very low rent housing where gang violence is rampant. It makes it much more difficult and much more challenging for that person of color to address or to focus on their education and to look for success. They've got to dig a foot out of the ground before they can even get started. I also, by the way, Brian, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just didn't want you to think that I was only addressing people of color. I am aware quite well of all of the discrimination that has gone on with other in other areas. I just thought we were discussing the color issue at this point, which is why I mentioned that. But
That's
sorry.
okay, Patty.
And let me
We're still friends,
point
right?
out, let me point out one thing, Patty. There are tons and tons of very successful Black people who came out of poverty. I
That's true.
had a long chat with one just yesterday. There are people make decisions about their life. Some people make good decisions and some people make bad ones. The bad ones are still living in poverty and in ghettos, and they're going to school where I wonder, are those schools have bad teachers? Or is
Yeah,
it because
there are, very honestly, as a teacher, if you have a choice to teach in an inner city school where there is a high rate of crime, where the average test scores are extremely low, or you have a chance to teach
Yeah.
in the suburban school, yes, there are those that are altruistic that are going to go into that more difficult school to teach, but there are many that don't.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that, and I've heard it many times. Thank you all.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.